Hey everyone, it's Kaylee here for Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for today's soap making video where I'm doing a restock of my Oatmeal and Goats milk soap. Now this soap first came about when I had a customer approach me to do a custom loaf for her, and when I actually made it, I really liked it, and I had a few people ask me about it while it was sitting on the cure rack, and I decided to make a batch for the shop as well, and it sold really well. And I have actually made a couple of batches since that first custom request, and I'm almost sold out of it again, so I'm just making a new batch. It is a really simple soap with goat's milk, oatmeal, and no fragrance and no colour. So it's simply mix and pour into the mould. So once we've done that and we've got it all cut, I'm then going to show you the steps that I take after I've done the cut to get it ready to go onto the cure rack. So let's go and see how I make my goat's milk and oatmeal soap, and first of all we're going to weigh out all the ingredients. Let's go. We are all set and ready to make the soap. We've got our oils that have come down to room temperature. I've also got my lye water here, and because I've made that sort of concentrated lye water, I do have some goat's milk, and I'm using the liquid form in this rather than some powder because I'm already using my colloidal oatmeal. Now I've learned from previous ones I really should actually sift the powders into the oils to get rid of any clumps. It just makes it easier to add to the soap. If you have got clumps in your soap that don't, or in the oils that haven't blended in properly, it does pose a few issues with the soap in terms of you get these clumps of clay and milk powders and stuff all through the soap, and it doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, and then you end up with these big holes in your soap as well. So I am going to sift my colloidal oatmeal in here. Now I choose to use proper colloidal oatmeal in here that has been purchased because this soap is designed for people with sensitive skin. People say you can make colloidal oatmeal at home just by putting in some oats into your blender and mixing it up. And technically you can, you're just making ground oatmeal. Colloidal oatmeal is so expensive because of the amount of wastage that goes into it when they are blending the oats. It is blended far more than what you can actually do with a food presser or one of those Ninja Bullets or Thermomix. In fact, the Thermomix is probably going to be the closest you can get to proper colloidal oatmeal, but it goes through so much processing and so much waste is produced from making the oatmeal. That is why it is so expensive, but it's also much finer and it disperses easier, and it also actually dissolves in water as well. So there is a big difference between making it at home and purchasing it in. And for this soap, because it is for people with very sensitive skin, I choose to go with true colloidal oatmeal to make sure that it feels good on the skin as well and isn't too scratchy if I haven't blitzed it enough. Now that I have got that all sifted in there and it's a nice fine powder, let's get it mixed into the oils. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add in my goat's milk. Now you can actually do a full goat's milk by freezing your goat's milk and then adding your lye directly to it, but if you've watched any of my past videos, you know that I don't have easy access to a freezer, and it's just not possible to freeze it at home and bring it into work because it's going to be melted and at the wrong temperature, and I'll still end up scorching my milk. So I always make a a very strong lye solution, and then add my milk into my oils like we've just done there. Mix it up, then we're going to pour in our lye water, and that is pretty much all we do. There's no fragrance in this one. We're going to pour it straight into our mold. I have finally got that one to come to trace. Now with this actual recipe, I still use the base oils that I use for all of my other soaps. It is just quite literally that the lye is different, and I do find that that makes a huge difference on how this one actually traces, and it does take longer to bring it to trace than most of my other recipes do. I have finished messing around with the top of this soap. I keep this one really plain and simple. Now I know I said with the pine tar soap that I do like my soaps to have that little bit of zhuzh in them, to have that little bit of swirl, a little bit of texture, but because this soap is actually designed for people with sensitive skin who just want a nice plain bar of soap, I don't even texture the top of it, because sometimes when you've got those spoon tops and they've got the little sharp edges on them, they're not super sharp, they're not going to cut you, but they're a bit pointy. For someone with sensitive skin, that could actually irritate them, so I usually keep this soap nice and plain, no texture on it, try and get it as flat as I possibly can, no swirls or anything like that. And as much as I really want to add them in, I do hold back that little bit of restraint on it, so we do get this really nice natural looking soap here. What we're going to do is leave this one overnight, and then we're going to come back and cut it. It's not going to be super interesting, but we'll cut it and then we'll also tidy it up. Okay, so it's the next day. We are ready to unmold our Oatmeal and Goats milk soap. So let's grab it out of the mold here, peel back our liner, and I love how easily this one unmolds out of here because it is just so simple. Let's get that down. Love the color it has gone, and it has lost that sort of funky smell that goat's milk soap can get. It doesn't have that sort of, I don't know, it's a smell that it gets that actually does disappear while it is curing, but for some reason whenever I do this recipe I don't get that smell, but you can actually smell that it's got that colloidal oatmeal in. It's got that really creamy sort of smell to it. I've got Ida, we're going to get this one onto her. Alright, I've got Ida all opened up there. Let me pick up my huge loaf here and get her lined up with the soap. We'll get our little end pieces cut so we can make our little soap end bundles that I'm now doing. That is looking pretty good, and through we go. Oh, it's gone a little bit harder than I expected. Oh, all right, let's take a look. It's not going to be anything too much. You can see it's a beautiful color, and it is going to be the same on every single bar. So I'm not going to go through and show you all of these because literally I can show you even in the middle it's not going to be any different. We have got a little bit of a gel ring happening in the middle. In fact, we've got a little bit of gel on that one as well. I'm not bothered about the gel ring. It will actually disappear while it is on the cure rack. But really happy with how this is looking. I'm going to get all of this off. Just went and grabbed my little trusty tray. I'm going to get all of these soaps off of here. I'm going to leave them on my tray for about 2 to 3 days, and then we'll come back and we will prep them ready for going onto the cure rack, which includes beveling the edges and putting our stamps on them. So I've had my soap sitting on my tray for about 24 hours now because I've got the air conditioning running in the shop and it's quite cool in here. These have hardened up quickly. If it was, say, springtime when I don't have the air conditioner going, I may have had to have leave them for about 48 hours before I can do the next sort of step. I just wait until I've got quite nice hard edges on the soap, so I get really nice clean bevels. Now when it comes to beveling your soap, some people do it, some people don't. I do it because personally I don't like the hard edges on soaps. I do find it really uncomfortable to use, so I like to take just the very edges off my soap so they're nice and smooth in the hand and they don't feel horrible on that first use. Because if someone's never used handmade soap before and they get that really sharp edge, it could actually put them off entirely over the long run, that initial sort of sensation of it. So I do like to make sure that my customers' first sensation of soap is a really good one. So what I'm going to do is use some tools just to take the very edges off my soap, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Now the first and cheapest way is to get a potato peeler or vegetable peeler, and it really is a matter of experimenting and finding which one works best for you. You can have those really cheap 30-cent ones which are like a little, looks like, almost like a little hacksaw sort of thing, or you can have a really expensive one. I personally find this style the easiest to use. And all you do is you grab your peeler and you just simply pull it down the edges of your soap like so. So I'll just do another one, and you can see it gives us a really nice smoother edge on our soap, so it's not as sharp. Now this is a really good cheap way of beveling the edges of your soaps. There are a couple of little issues. When you first start doing this sort of stuff and you're really cautious about your soap, you do tend to go that little bit slower, so you do end up with really nice beveled even edges. But sometimes when you've been making soap for a while and you've been doing, you know, beveling a few of them, sometimes you can get a little bit too crazy and then your bevels end up all winky wonky if you go a little bit too quick. I mean, that is the beauty of using your vegetable peeler, is that it is quite quick and easy to take those edges, but I don't know if we're going to be able to get a good enough view. Sometimes they're not always entirely even when you do them, which is why tools like this can come in handy. This one is from off Wickedly Goods, and it took her a while to convince me to have a go at this because I personally don't like how much soap these little pieces take off. But Lee has made a special one. I'm not going to show it because she does actually keep this one hidden, so it can actually be specific to her her maker, and it takes off just a small amount of the soap. So all we're going to do is take this piece, the corner piece, line it up onto the soap. I find it best to butt it up onto the bottom of your soap where it's nice and flat, and then you take your tool and you just pull it down, and it gives you this beautiful edge on the soap, and it doesn't take off too much of the soap because you don't want to waste the soap, but you do want that really nice beveled edge on here. In fact, I use the deeper side on that one, so let's do it using the smaller side, which I prefer, and you can see it has only taken off a very small part as opposed to the bigger bit that I first did. So she does have that sort of option to take off small bits and large bits, but by using this little gadget here, it doesn't matter how many or how fast you go, you always get a really nice smooth beveled edge along here. So Lee's has been the first one I've actually liked. I have had others in the past and I usually end up just giving them away because I really don't like them, but Lee's little handy tool that she's got for on here for taking off just that small amount is really good. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to take the edges off all of these soaps, and then once we've done that, it will be time to stamp. So as I've been beveling these, I've been laying it out on a piece of grease-proof paper, and next thing we're going to do is stamp them, and this has got my logo on. And I always get questions about where I got this stamp from. I got this many years ago from a company called BB Collection. I'll leave a link down in the description box. I've had this stamp I think since about 2017, and it still stamps beautifully every single time, so it is great quality. Highly recommend using them. And I'm just going to grab a little hammer that I've got here, and I'm just going to knock my stamp in. And I usually do it a couple of times just to make sure I get a nice crisp clear image, but I also don't want to hit it so hard that you get an indentation of the stamp in the soap. So it does take a little bit of practice, and I kind of go one in the middle and then on the end, and that gives me a really nice even stamp. And if ever I'm not too happy with how one comes up, it's actually very easy to line the stamps back up and just give it a little bit more of a tap to get that better indentation on here. Now you could be tempted just to line your stamp up and give it one great big whack, but what I usually find when I used to do that is I used to get this really deep impression in the middle here, and the stamp would rock and I wouldn't get a good enough impression either side. So I have found that gentle taps across the stamp give the best impressions if you've got a slightly larger stamp. I do also have this soap stamp, which was also made by BB Collection, and because it is so much smaller and the hammer fits in one place, usually just one tap on this one is enough to get it to imprint nicely into the soap. If you are having trouble with your stamp actually sticking to your soap, I usually give the stamp a very light spritz with some rubbing alcohol, and that just helps it release from off the soap. Some will actually spray the soap with the rubbing alcohol, but I personally find the soap then becomes really slippery and you get finger marks and all sorts, so I prefer to spray my stamp. If I wasn't making a video, I would now actually gather up all these soaps and go and pop them up onto the cure rack, but because we are making a video, what I do like to do is pop a few photos at the end of the video, so we need to take those. So also on the counter here I have this white photo backing stuff. It's like a vinyl. What I need to do is take all of my soaps from off of the greaseproof paper and pop it onto the photo backing board. The reason I actually stamp on the greaseproof paper is for a couple of reasons. The first is if I actually stamp with them on that vinyl sheet, sometimes they do stick to the sheet. We end up with marks on the sheet, which then need to be, you know, might end up with a sort of outline of the soap, and when it comes time to doing photos, you need to kind of get those marks out of the way. So I prefer not to do the stamping directly on my photo backing board. And the other reason is that sometimes when you are stamping, you're actually pushing that air from underneath. There's only like a tiny amount, but there's just enough air underneath your soaps to stop them from sticking. And when you hammer them, it pushes that air out, and they can sometimes suction down onto the photo paper or the photo board thing. So I just try not to stamp on them. So what we're going to do is transfer them, get them all lined up onto my photo board, just the way I like to do the photos. So I do actually have a little bit of a mark on there from the previous soaps that I was taking photos of. So I've just given it a quick spray with a bit of rubbing alcohol and a bit of a wipe down, because you'll be surprised if you don't take those tiny little marks out the way, they look like massive marks when it comes time to doing the photos. Now that I've got that done, I am just going to line these up. So I just do a very simple line up of the soap so that we can do a bit of a scan. So especially if I've got lots of different designs, you can kind of see all the different patterns going across as we do a panning view. So let's get all these lined up on here. Alright, so now that they are all lined up, and yes, I am pretty precise when I'm doing this, because sometimes when I go to edit those photos, it is so obvious when your soaps aren't lined up properly, like more obvious than it is when you're looking at them in person. And sometimes it's those sort of little photographic details that can really affect whether or not someone is inspired by the soap that you've done or something like that. So I am very particular, and there is my OCD thing as well. Now you could do your photographs in two ways. Most people I know like to use their phone. I personally am a little bit more old school, and I have got a DSLR camera. I did a photographic workshop with a local photographer to actually learn how to use these and what all the different buttons mean. And I personally find I get much better shots with my camera than I do with my phone. Even using the phone in the raw photography format, I find it very hard to control the light, especially here in this shop. As you can see, as I'm moving around, there are a lot of shadows, and it doesn't matter where I stand because of where the lights are. I have got constant shadows moving all over this. So I do like to take my photos with the DSLR in raw format, and then when I actually take them through to my editing program, I can edit out those really harsh shadows and keep the soaps looking as they actually should. So I'm going to open up my camera, get it turned on, and I usually like to come so I can see what's on my screen. I usually like to do all of my photos using the 16:9 because that is what the film footage is, so it just makes it easier to put into our film editing. So now I've got my camera all done, it's time to get these photos done. And because I'm short, I do need to get up onto a step stool so that I'm above the soap so that there are no shadows. And that is another thing. If you are getting shadows in your photo from when you say standing like this, the further up you can take your camera, the further away or the further those shadows are going to move out the way. So I've worked out for me in my shop, I need to get up onto my step ladder to remove those close shadows, and then I zoom in on my lens. So now that I've got the two photos that I like to have, and I usually take a couple, so there will be 3 or 4 shots all in one sort of direction, just so I can pick the best one out. But now I've done that, it's time to get these onto the cure rack. And again, because I'm short, I need my trusty little step stool to get me to that top layer. And I'm also going to add on my little end pieces up here as well to cure. Now this cure rack, it's actually one that I got from off of Kmart. I don't know if they still sell it, but at the time you could actually buy the poles and then buy however many shelves that you want and then put them at the distance that you want. I think they do still sell them, but not at that height. But if you have a look around for those sort of building shelf systems, that is what I use. And then I just lay the grease-proof paper on here because I was never too sure what sort of quality this steel actually is on it. So I lay the tissue or the grease-proof paper on here to stop any marks from getting on the soap, and every so often I just change those out. Now that soap's going to sit on the cure rack for the next 4 to 5 weeks, and I always give myself 4 to 5 weeks. Although soap will technically be ready in about 4 weeks, you never know what the weather's going to do. You never know what things are going to pop up in life about whether or not you're going to get it off the rack in that 4 weeks time. So I always give myself that little bit of extra lead time just in case I need it. And then I do the final step, which is to take one of those bars of soap home with me, and I do a lifestyle shot of the soap while I'm at home in my sort of photographic area. Then I load it onto the website and it goes out onto socials, and people hopefully then start buying them. I hope you've enjoyed coming along as I did a remake of my oatmeal and goat's milk soap, and I was able to share a few little tips about how I actually process the soaps after I have finished making them. Thank you so much for coming along with me. If you did enjoy it, why not leave me a thumbs up and any comments down below. And until the next video comes out, I hope you have a great one, and I'll see you then. Bye.